All computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
Right, thank you everybody for joining today for the governing body meeting of the Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin CCG. So by means of introduction, just to start with a couple of house rules if I can, just to mention that the meeting, I'm just admitting a few people that are still arriving in, sorry about that. So just the normal house rules apply. Please avoid using the chat function. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. The recording does go on the CCG website afterwards. But the public are unable to see the comments in chat function, so if you can avoid those, please. Apologies, I'm just still admitting a few people arriving. And I'll make an apology in advance for my cough, which I shall try and suppress, but might dominate a bit of the recording. Okay, so if I can just start then with a general introduction. If anyone else is able to admit any latecomers, that would be most helpful. Okay, so welcome to all of those who have joined from live streaming and who later watched this recording. I'm mindful today that as we discuss our own healthcare system, that in another part of Europe, war rages, and with the tragic consequences for so many individuals. I'm sure that our thoughts and hopes are very much with the people of Ukraine and with those endeavouring to provide health and trauma care in the most horrific of circumstances. More locally, today we'll see a theme of workforce challenges referenced within the papers that we shall be discussing here. Workforce challenges in recruitment to our community services, staffing shortages due to COVID-19, workforce constraints impacting planned care activity, consultant specialist shortages in radiology and haematology, and also in surgical theatre staff, impacts of workforce difficulties within the MPFT workforce, including the eating disorder service, ongoing recruitment campaign by 111 to meet the demands of their service, the capacity and workload challenges within the multi-agency safeguarding hub, primary care difficulties in recruiting to the additional roles reimbursement scheme to new roles in supporting delivery of primary care. Our own board assurance framework clearly references the risks of the CCG workforce challenges. We still have CCG staff out on redeployment, supporting the whole system response to the pandemic. It's within this environment that our teams and system partners are currently operating while continuing to deliver the governance and assurance processes. And it's within these workforce challenges, with these workforce challenges in mind, that I thank those across the system who continue to work extraordinarily hard in their clinical roles and also those in supportive and managerial roles. Thank you. So moving to apologies. I've received apologies from Simon Whitehouse. So item 34 on today's agenda shall be instead covered by Alison Smith and Claire Skidmore. I've also received apologies from Claire Parker and Rachel Robinson. If any more apologies, please let me know. Okay. In that case, if we move to members' declarations of interest, if anyone has any declarations of interest above and beyond those already within the register of interests that we have within the CCG, particularly pertaining to any of today's agenda. Okay, so if we move on to minutes from the governing body meeting of the 12th of January 2022. If any questions regarding accuracy of the minutes that need bringing up, please do so now. I just got a couple of minor items to raise within the minutes. In 11.2, I believe it should read that Dr. Pepper clarified that the niche paper rather than the niche report. It goes on to describe the niche report, but that first word should be paper. And then in 16.3, there's just a minor typo. I think it should say in 16.3 of staff rather than odd staff. And those were my only two very minor amendments to the minutes. Any other comments? Please use the hand function. No, okay. Lynn, hello Lynn. Oh no, I'm admitting Lynn. It wasn't a hand up, it was letting her into the meeting. Okay, right, okay, so moving from the minutes to the action tracker that we have from previous governing body meetings. If I might start on the first item of on the action tracker. Zena, just for clarification on this one, as I understand it from the comments and the actions that we've got here, there's ongoing work between the CCG, SAF and NHS E&I on data quality issues, and that the intention is for a further update on this to be provided at the June governing body meeting. But until that time, as I read it, through the NHS E&I system quarterly meetings and also through oversight through SOAG, we are provided with assurance that progress is indeed occurring in terms of quality of data that's captured. Is that right?
Thanks, John. So this is a report I would have wished to bring to this forum before now, and it's one of those matters that is impacting on our workforce availability, as you referenced in your introduction, John. And not least from the CCG, but also from partners, you know, SAF in particular, in their ability to be able to service the ask and the requirement to do this detailed piece of work. It is a piece of work that I've got a draft view of, so I do have some early information, and that needs to be finalised, and it's right and proper that it's presented through to the LMNS programme board as the assurance arm of the ICS moving forward, and also shared to this meeting. So it will come. I've asked for a sort of a RAG scored dashboard on whether or not the data is complete and whether or not is the data accurate, and it's a mixed picture. And I've also asked for a statement on actions that are being taken to gain more accuracy and more assurance, and also how we triangulate information. In the meantime, we're working very hard in the background to check things out in the absence of really confirmed robust data. There's a range of things that we do, John, and through our quality reporting schedule, and which has been refreshed for the ICS, I can confirm that we're fully compliant with all of the requirements of the perinatal quality surveillance approach. The LMNS has had a revised function to take account of safety of perinatal services, and that's all included, and that is an active and live process for us. So that's a main scrutiny route through. SOAG does receive updates and reports, but I would say they tend to be at a higher level, and they cover progress against the CQC actions. So often we don't get into the level of detail, I would say. So SOAG is important to us, but in terms of the data quality, it's really through the perinatal quality surveillance route, which, as I say, is well embedded in the work that we're doing. Just to answer about line of sight of the CCG, as part of these transition arrangements, we've changed how we work as a quality team, and we're now embedded into a number of quality forums at SATH that consider maternity data, and indeed part of the Maternity Transformation Assurance Committee. And that committee provides assurance on the Ockenden actions in particular, and to a public-facing group called ORAC, Oversight, I'll have to get the words out actually, Review and Assurance Group for maternity, and there is a significant due diligence done on that process. It's those kind of things that are reported to SOAG, but the actual detail the forums are places where the CCG is round the table, and we've worked with them so that they've revised their serious incident reporting, and I have confidence that the right things are being reported and the right due diligence is happening there. That's just to give you a kind of touching on a few of our mechanisms.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thanks, Zena. So I would suggest that we, as in the recommendation, that this remain open to the June meeting. And at that point, we have an update as to where we are with regards data quality assurance. That would be smashing. Thanks, Zena. So in the second item within the action tracker, that's regarding the niche recommendations. And again, as I understand it from this, the recommendation here is that the CCG governing body will receive an update on the progress of the report, addressing the recommendations arising from niche, but that additionally, as this is an ongoing piece of work, as I understand it, Zena, after the dissolution of the CCG, we will be ensuring that there's a handover process of these recommendations of work such that the ICB is able to capture that ongoing work.
Yes, I'm confident that we've captured that, John, and it's not just niche, which was a particular piece of work. It's around the system end of life care strategy, and also the improvements required at SATH in accordance with their CQC report, which showed end of life care was rated as inadequate. So there's those three pieces. And all of those are being reported through to the system quality group, and we expect a report to be coming to the April meeting there. Okay,
thank you, Zena. And item 3 is takes part on today's agenda. Item 4, the BAF has been actioned and recommend that that item be closed. So unless any other questions regarding the action tracker. Okay, so moving on to questions from members of the public. We received a number of questions in advance of the last governing body meeting. So the questions and answers are within the pack. I just really would like to take this opportunity to thank members of the public that are coming forward with questions, and that's really positive. And again, Zena, just once more, if I can just ask for some clarity on one of the answers that we've provided, and that is within on page 7 of 9 of the responses to public questions. Zena, that the first question on maternity on page 7 regarding births before arrival. Just really looking for some clarification there in terms of the response to the question regarding births before arrival. I don't believe that the response was in any way intended to be a criticism of mothers' choices, but I wish to explore just the context of choices in terms of the support and guidance provided to mothers before labour.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thank you for asking for the clarity on that. I think the question was clearly looking for some themes and any learning out of the incidents. I did note that maternal choice was a theme, but it was a very minor theme, and it's only a small part of what we saw. The numbers of born before arrivals are small, so sometimes we need to sort of take it over a longer period of time and look at increased numbers. And it's a matter that we keep under review. So we do review it every month with the trust, and then at various points we do a more consolidated, deeper dive, and we're due to do that now. And I've just agreed with the new Director of Midwifery that that's what we're going to do. We're going to undertake another themed review of all the factors that may have contributed to the numbers of born before arrivals, and take a broader view, looking at all of the workforce piece, knowing that SAF have reported a positive picture in terms of their maternity staffing recruitment. We would expect that to kind of translate into a more positive experience for women. We're also doing a piece of work with the Maternity Voices Partnership, John. Now, these very much do give us the voice of service users, and what I've asked that the MVP undertake is a piece of work to understand women's experiences of accessing services at a time where we know that some of our services are reduced because of those staffing concerns. So I would hope to be able to bring that into the BBA review as well. So it's definitely still under consideration, and absolutely not a criticism at all of the women that are accessing our services. We want to do everything we can to support them to have a safe and positive birth experience.
Indeed. Many thanks, Zena. Okay, so therefore moving on to Mark, Accountable Officers Report. Hi, Mark.
Hi, John. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're well. Just a few bits from me this month. It's been a busy time, as is obvious. If I just begin, John, by congratulating Claire Skidmore, who has been appointed and announced as the new Integrated Care Board. I'm going to get the title wrong, Claire, but it's something like Executive Director of Finance or something like that. But the finance head honcho, which is probably a better title. So Claire, many congratulations to you. Absolutely delighted for you, much deserved. You'll be absolutely fantastic in that. And selfishly for us, of course, it really helps in terms of the continuity between the work of the CCG and the ICB. So on my behalf and on behalf of the governing body, well done, congratulations, and much deserved. So John, thank you for letting me do that. I also understand that the ICB has published the appointment of 3 non-executive directors. So I won't go through the detail of that now, because I think it may well be covered later on in the ICB update that colleagues give, but to welcome their appointment and to say that we very much look forward to the next period in terms of working in consort. And I guess that just gives me an opportunity just to mark, I suppose, the next phase from the 1st of April of the ICB, where we really move into the ICB being as much as possible in shadow form for April, May and June. What that means particularly, I think, is the ICB beginning to kind of work its governance more effectively, and a continuation of the work that we've been doing as a CCG to try and support that, particularly with things in common where we possibly can, in terms of kind of working things together. And John, I'm very pleased to say that Simon and I continue to enjoy a good relationship and making sure that both the CCG is conducting its statutory role, which is important, but that the ICB is beginning to take up the reins, particularly on some of the strategic issues, is important too. So just to let people know that the 1st of April, the kind of next 3 months, if you like, are almost upon us, and that will be marked, and we'll begin to move forward with that. Simon, I understand, is hoping to announce further appointments in the next week or so, and so we'll share that with governing body members when we can do so. The second thing that I wanted to acknowledge this morning is the disappointing news about the delay to the Ockenden report, so kind of Ockenden 2 as we know it. I just want to acknowledge the difficulty that or the difficult issues that gives to local families, which we're very mindful of. It's totally out of our gift, of course, and all we can do is be ready to read that report, understand it, acknowledge it, accept it when it's published. So we'll continue to wait. We don't know any more than anybody else about that. Donna Ockenden produced a statement yesterday or this week that's been shared with families. There are some issues around parliamentary process, which I'm not privy to. So as soon as we know when that might be published, then we will again share that with governing body members, and that'll be an important part of both ours and the ICB's considerations going forward. The third thing I wanted to mention today was the letter that we have written back to Secretary of State on the hospital transformation programme. I've circulated that to governing body members this week. It's been a strange experience, really, because the original letter was purposefully written as a public letter from the Secretary of State to us, because he wanted us to reply in public, which we've done. The kind of form for that, of course, is to share that with our partners, which we've done with NHS England, but also actually to share it kind of in real time as we sense it with the local media. So we've done that too. I think it clearly sets out the position around HTP. It particularly talks about the provision of urgent care services in Telford on a 24/7 basis, and about the development of what is known as A&E local in the future. Much more work, of course, continuing with that. I'm pleased to say that colleagues in Shrewsbury and Telford continue to work hard on the development of the strategic outline case. And John, the letter that you, just to make reference to it, the letter that you wrote on our behalf to the chair of SAF around the strategic outline case, of course, is in the pack today. I'm not intending to republish the public letter. It's on we've made it available on our website, but just by talking about it now, we can make reference to it in our minutes so that the record is well kept. So I think the letter's clear in terms of where we're up to. SAF continue to take that forward with some purpose, which is good. Once we're through the regional hurdle, if you like, the programme and the way the programme is going to be funded will be referred through to the national team for consideration. So it's usual process for things like this. So that work will continue. I also John, just wanted to mention that we continue to keep colleagues from Wales, particularly from Powys Health Board, cited on that. And there will be a meeting of the Independent Oversight Group, which I chair with Claire Skidmore's support, which we continue to use where we can, as much as we can, to keep our stakeholders, again, including colleagues in Wales, cited, because very, very mindful that there's implications, of course, for Welsh patients as well as our own patients in this process. So important that they're not forgotten in this, and we will continue to do that. I think I'm up to four. The fourth thing to mention today, might be three. It's been a long week already. The fourth thing I think to mention today is just to acknowledge the work that continues around urgent care. We continue to meet as a gold team 3 times a week. Silver is still meeting under Sam's leadership a couple of times a week. John, I just wanted to acknowledge, sorry, 4, Sam's telling me. The thing I wanted to acknowledge first is COVID. So despite what some people might want us to believe, it really hasn't gone away. There are more patients with COVID in hospital in Shrewsbury and Telford this week than there were last week, than there were the week before. So we are seeing the numbers creep up. We were around the 55 number, so that is 2 full wards of patients with COVID in our hospitals. That is very difficult to manage. It's very difficult for those individuals and their families. I am pleased to say that we're not seeing an impact on intensive care services. For me, that's probably about the vaccine doing its job, and the booster programme in particular that we very much were part of leading and worked very hard on. So that's good news. But nevertheless, to need a hospital bed with COVID, is people that are very sick. And so we continue to support them. We continue to work through that. But I think it's really important context, despite the fact that everything's moved on to other things, quite rightly, in terms of the national media, that COVID really hasn't gone away and is still very much amongst us. With that in mind, I just wanted to also update the governing body on work we continue to do around urgent care, and just put into the public domain some decision that we've made recently that you'll recall. So it's our intention to do more work as a system, particularly on urgent care, with a focus on urgent care outside of hospital, particularly on a 24/7 basis. And over the next 6 months or so, the intention is to undertake a review to look particularly at the primary and community urgent care services aspects. The review will consider how we better coordinate with 111, with minor injuries units and with out of hours provision. And the review will take the time to design a fully integrated service that is suitable and fit for purpose, importantly including significant patient and public involvement. That will also be done in full partnership with our colleagues in the local authorities. Following this review, the Integrated Care Board, as the successor to the CCG, will need to undertake a robust procurement exercise. In order to enable this important work to happen, the governing body has agreed to make a direct award to Shropdoc for GP out-of-hours care for a period of 12 months from June 22 to June 23. And importantly, this supports the safe continuation of our current out-of-hours arrangements. So thank you for allowing me just to cover that off so that it's clearly in the public domain that we continue our work with Shropdoc for the next 12 months while we commit to and conclude what will be a very important review for the system. Final thing from me today is to mention our next governing body meeting, in fact our last governing body meeting, can you believe it, will be on the 8th of June. The reason for mentioning it is we are in the morning going to run a session for CCG and ICB staff, which will mark really the end of the CCG, and we'll look to support staff through into the ICB. So that will be on the 8th of June in the morning, and we extend an invitation to governing body members who wish to join that session. I think it should be good. And then John and I have agreed in the afternoon, starting at 2 o'clock at the Albrighton, that the CCG will meet in person. Anybody remember that? We'll meet in person for what will be our last time on the 8th of June at 2 o'clock. So more information will be circulated about that with the detail, but just to really mark both the staff event in the morning, but also the governing body event in the afternoon, and the importance of that. John, final thing from me is just once again, if I may, just to conclude and add to the points you made earlier. We still have got CCG staff deployed supporting colleagues from across the system. I'm very grateful to them for the hard work of that. We begin to repatriate people now to their existing jobs. One of the things that we're looking to do is to continue to provide information and support to staff about the ICB. One of the things I wanted to mention is our approach to mandatory training. So to be totally open and honest with governing body members, that our performance on mandatory training at the moment isn't as good as we would like, but we've put in place a process by the end of May to try and make sure that every member of staff is up to date with their mandatory training and their statutory training. The reason I mention that is it's one of those things that we think is important in the handover to the ICB, so that staff are brought back in, they're looked after, they're supported, and they're up to date with the kind of legal requirements on them. So I'm very grateful to colleague directors who are working hard on that. Just thought I would mention it. And finally, therefore, to say thank you to my director colleagues. It has been, and have to say continues to be, a very difficult winter, and people have worked incredibly hard and are tired as well, which I'm very conscious of. So many of us are trying to get through to Easter now so that people get a break. But I just really wanted to acknowledge their very, very hard work and thank them for it in what is a time of change and and hard work. John, thank you. That's it from me this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And on behalf of the non-execs, I certainly echo those sentiments. Thank you to all those execs working as you are. Okay, any questions or comments for Mark before we move on to the quality and performance paper? Okay, thank you, Mark. So Zena and Julie, moving on into quality and performance. Thank you for the paper that you've presented. As per usual, we'll take these papers, they have all been read. So I'd like to use the usual format of opening the floor to questions and comments from members. And then if at the end of that we've not covered any of the areas that you would wish to highlight to us, then please do prompt and highlight those areas. Okay, so over to governing body members for the quality and performance report. Audrey.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Zena, good afternoon. You and John briefly talked over the tracker about data, about maternity data. So I've just got a bit of a further question about maternity data. Page 42 out of the 136 report, there's a little line that says there was no neonatal exceptions reported, however, data is still limited at present. And I was just wondering, even though you've said some words about it, what is the hold up for the maternity unit to be able to have excellent, accurate data? And is this affecting our quality narrative? And I think particularly against, and then probably the third part is, and are we benchmarking well then against national initiatives like Saving Babies' Lives bundles, etc.?
Yeah, so probably sort of slightly in reverse order in terms of the benchmarking. I mean, we do have, as a system and as an organisation, SATH will be providing information regionally. There is some discrepancy around the data that goes in and the data that comes out of those reports, and that's not unique to our system. So the data quality at regional level is wider than just the Shropshire system, and that's known. And what's important there is when we talk to that data is that we know the detail behind it. So that gives a level of assurance to our regional chief midwife who chairs the regional perinatal quality group. Just take me to your other questions.
So my first question was, what is the delay in us getting good maternity data?
Yeah, so I think some of it has been the rollout of Badgernet, which started last year, which has been seen as a really positive assurance step, and that's the maternity electronic record, and that allows us to almost press a button and come up with the audit data over time. Now, if that's only been implemented within the last 12 months, we won't have a longer data set to look at. So over time, our confidence in the data will increase. And as has been reported here previously, up until Badgernet being implemented, we were relying on manual data counts and audits of case notes, etc., and perhaps information not being stored or recorded in a standard format that you can compare like with like. So some of it is literally the audit methodology, and once it moves to electronic, there's a limited number of fields, there are a limited number that you have to fill in before you move forward. So I'm confident that that will happen. That said, the Badgernet maternity rollout is not yet complete, and we know that that is an ongoing matter for attention for SATH, and they're putting some additional focus on that. I think as well, Audrey, it's about availability of staff to sometimes collect the data and to do the audits. The Trust have a maternity partner in, they have Sherwood Forest Hospitals as an outstanding maternity service provider. So for certain data sets, we ask them to provide us with an assurance view, and they've provided that to us. So I think it's probably rate limited a little bit by the availability of resource to be eyes on to everything. I think where we can give really clear assurances around progress with the actions associated with the first Ockenden report, the Trust is reporting over an 80% compliance with that first suite of actions. In fact, it'll be higher than that now. And it's not just the Trust reporting that, this is the system is reporting that because we're part of that assurance process. So there are certain elements that have our confidence and other elements that we know will take some time. I think the other factor to consider is the change in personnel. There's a new director of midwifery who's 5 weeks into post, and it's a really good opportunity to take fresh eyes look again at the approach that the Trust is taking in terms of the data quality risks, and those are the conversations I'm having with her. And through that conversation we agreed, for example, the born before arrival information needed to be looked at again. So I'm confident that I've got good connectivity and that they are listening and they are responsive to what the CCG are asking. I'm equally confident it's a two-way dialogue and it's not just the CCG kind of having to push this over the line, so to speak, but it does take time. The important thing is how we get to a level of assurance, knowing that the data isn't as good as we would like. And I think, you know, explain that in the earlier points that were made.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Zena.
Thanks, Zena. And Mike.
Good afternoon, Zena. Can you tell me, again, following on, which is now page 43 of 136, it says, of the MLUs across the county, it seemed to be, I'm a bit confused because it says operational, but I thought some of them were shut. So can you give us an update of what actually is going on in which MLUs and what they are actually able to do? Because it's not, I don't get any clear idea of what the state of play is.
Thanks,
Does that
Mike.
make sense?
Yes, thanks for your question. So all of the MLUs are providing antenatal and postnatal care. Okay, so there are midwives operating out of all of those facilities at various points in the day and week. The Shrewsbury MLU birthing unit is closed due to a risk assessment that's been undertaken and that the CCG has participated in constructing and reviewing, and that's one that we do keep under review. Closed for intrapartum care, and the MLU at the Princess Royal Hospital, the Wrekin Maternity unit, is open for intrapartum care intermittently, and it's open when their staffing quota allows, and we've got communications available to women who are at the point of delivering and birthing, so that they know what is open to them when, and there's a telephone contact for them as well to check that out in the moment, so to speak. And in addition to that, home deliveries have been maintained throughout all of these service closures, so women do have a choice about location of birthing delivery. In addition to that, when the Wrekin MLU is closed for a midwife-led experience, the women attending in labour can still achieve a midwife-led birth on the consultant unit. Now, for technical reasons, we can't categorise that as a midwife-led experience because it's in a consultant unit, but they can achieve a midwife-led experience. I hope that clarifies. All of them are providing antenatal and postnatal care, and the Wrekin MLU intermittently provides intrapartum care when that's possible.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Thank you, Zena. I mean, I'm aware that this paper normally would go through quality and performance, but because of responding to the accelerated vaccination programme delivery and the system pressures that hasn't happened. But yes, Meredith, thank you.
Thank you, John. And that's a very good point you make. So we haven't had the Quality and Performance Committee to look at this in advance to kind of go over it in more detail. My query is around IAPT and eating disorder services. It just felt to me as if we were being a little passive around these services, which are stretched. I suspect significant workforce issues. And I just wanted to get some assurance from you, Zena and Julie, just in terms of the work that's underway to make sure that these services are able to deliver what I suspect is going to be an increasing demand from many people in our population.
Do you want me to start, Zena?
Yes, please.
So I think if that's the come across as what, then that's not true. There's an awful lot of work that the commissioners and the sort of performance team and the commissioners team are doing on this with regard to IAPS. There's quite a lot of work at the moment underway. We've had kind of two slightly different models across the two parts of the county that's now coming together to provide a single model of care for IAP. We do anticipate that that will give benefit to our patients, but I think you're quite right, Meredith. The big question around mental health services at the moment is going to be that demand and capacity question, and that's a piece of work that we've acknowledged we need to do, and are working with the trust to gain some information on that. Again, it's very difficult to project that, but that's what we will be doing, to look at the service when it's combined and what the capacity that gives us as a system, and then projecting forward what we believe to be the demand. Eating disorders is slightly more complicated, and it's unfortunate that Claire Parker's not with us today, so forgive me. I'm not as close to the detail of that as I have been, but my understanding is that with that, again, we're continuing to use the additional investment that we're given for mental health services and eating disorders is one of the areas that's been prioritised for that. It also does link into the Tier 4 provision that's commissioned and by NHS England that we know is not sufficient, and that we've been working really hard with our specialised commissioning colleagues to look at that and to see where we can increase that, because we know that's been a significant area of increase in demand during the pandemic and will continue to be so for the foreseeable future. So I can't give you any easy answers, Meredith, that it's all going to be okay, but rest assured we have got people focusing on it and working on it, and we'll continue to bring updates on that. Probably we'll bring the detailed updates through Strategic Commissioning Committee, and then up any specific queries up to the Quality and Performance Committee.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I was a bit pejorative in my question. I realise there's often work going on behind the scenes that doesn't always appear in this paper. So being able to see a bit more of the action rather than just a kind of a recognition that there's a problem is always very helpful. So thank you for that.
And we've tried to structure the report that certainly goes to Quality and Performance. That's exactly how we've tried to do that in terms of what are the issues, what are the actions, and so we'll continue to do that.
Thank you.
So may I just suggest then that we include a little bit more detail in the report for the next meeting, and we'll capture that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zena. I think that's an excellent suggestion. Donna.
Yeah, thank you. And in part, one of my questions was just raised by Meredith in relation to just seeing some more of the action, because very aware that there will be a lot going behind the scenes, but I think it's important that governing body gets to see some of that. And I think particularly in relation to the cancer targets, where we, again, we've got some difficulties in meeting those for all the reasons that have been outlined earlier in the meeting, etc. But I think it's just, we're several years into the pandemic now, and understanding what exactly is going on with outcomes for patients in terms of their stage of presentation, etc., would be exceedingly useful. And then just on flipping to the other end in terms of primary care, and perhaps I didn't see anything specifically on the quality of primary care in this report, and recognising that the CQC ratings on practices, etc., and one where we have got some we've had concerns highlighted, and the work that's going on with that would be useful, or perhaps we could have a little commentary on it.
Thank you, Chair. Are you happy for me to respond to Donna in particular? Thank you. I think it's probably just a feature of our reporting cycle, Donna, and the fact that our quality committee in February was stood down because of the system pressures. We've got a report coming to the primary care committee. I think it's the March meeting. I've seen the paper and I've approved that. That's around quality in primary care, and I know that's a forum that you're directly involved in, and the detail will be there. What I can share with you though, and with this group, and this is what I would wish to update the board since the report was written then, that Highly medical practice was a practice that was visited and inspected by CQC, and they published a report on their website on the 14th of January. It didn't meet our timelines for reporting in January, and as I say, February, we didn't have a meeting. The medical practice was rated as inadequate, and it was inadequate for a number of safety reasons around high-risk medicines management, and this is about the monitoring and ongoing line of sight of patients in receipt of high-risk medicines. And whenever you get a medicine's risk, you will get an inadequate rating. It's as serious as that for CQC, so you can see why that happened. The management of long-term conditions for some patients and the ongoing kind of treatment of those, and something around the emergency equipment and medications available in the practice. Clearly there's more to it. There were 3 conditions placed on that trust by organisation by CQC. What has happened is that the CCG has provided significant support to Highly medical practice, and they have been very receptive to the support plan that we've worked with them on. They've provided an update to CQC about the various actions, and we're satisfied that they're making really good progress on that. We've had a number of our team, both from primary care, medicines management and the quality team, meeting with the practice on a weekly and now fortnightly basis. We think they're making good progress. We think when CQC come back in to re-inspect them and check on their progress, that they will find that the matters have been addressed. So I'm very confident on that, and as I say, a fuller report going to PCC in the next couple of weeks, and we'll bring it back to board in I think it's May, by which time I would hope to be in a position to say that they're over that difficulty.
Thank you, Zena. That's been a very helpful update.
Okay, thanks. And Julie, did you want to add to that point before I move to Lynn?
Thank you. Yes, it was just to add on Donna's point around cancer. You're absolutely right, Donna, and we are working on that in terms of the alternative presentations around, late presentation in terms of cancer. We're working with not only our colleagues in Shrewsbury and Telford hospitals for that data, but also wider with the West Midlands Cancer Alliance to work on that. And so that is something that will feed through the Quality and Performance Committee, but to also assure you that we were doing, as a system, we were actually doing very well in terms of our cancer performance up until probably towards just before Christmas, really, and the latest sort of Omicron pressures and winter pressures. But as a system, we're reviewing all of our improvement plans by tumour site, and we've been working through those over the last couple of weeks. And again, a summary of that will go through future quality and performance. So we have the 2 things. One's looking at those any late presentations, but also at our improvement plans to get us back on track.
Thank you, Julie. Again, very helpful update.
Okay, thanks very much. And mindful of time, Lynn.
I just wanted to pick up on a few points that have just been raised, really. Just to inform the governing body that as of the current time, we haven't received any comments from patients of Highly medical practice, but also to let you know that both Health Watch are currently running a call out for comments and experiences of IAP services, and that includes those people who haven't been able to access them. And we've also just published our Children, Young People Crisis Mental Health report as well, which is available on both of our websites. So I just wanted to inform.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And Zena, did you want to just respond to Lynn on that? I noticed your hands up. Or was
it's
that
slightly separate, but you cut out, Lynn. Did you say you've had no concerns expressed around Highly? That's important.
No comments, no.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lynn. Thanks for that. Mike?
Very quickly, regarding the cancer bits, that is obviously dependent on imaging. How are we going with just plain X-rays and access to them? Because if you talk about some lung cancers, that the delay, they can double in size in 2 weeks. So any delay in theory, if it's too long, can cause problems. So are we getting closer there?
Can I ask Julie to respond to that? Julie, you're on mute, sorry.
It wouldn't come off, sorry.
No.
We are, and I'm hopeful that we'll have an update through over the next few weeks where we've improved in terms of the access around X-rays, because you're absolutely right. However, again, because still being mindful of infection prevention and control measures and managing appointments, we have got measures in place for patients to access urgent appointments, and we're going to continue to get that communicated out to practices. Again, the open access we can't provide for the time being. So again, we've worked on, we need to find another way of getting that urgent access for those query chest X-rays. You're absolutely right. So I'm hopeful that we'll have something going out very shortly on that, Mike. And your other issue in terms of diagnostics, you're absolutely right. Our workforce is again our single biggest constraint around our diagnostics. And we continue to, again, as a system and across the system, we're working hard on that and looking at both at overseas recruitment as well as local, and also being quite innovative in terms of new posts and again, sharing the training across the system to try and again, make it more attractive. But, you know, as a result of the pandemic, we've obviously got repeat diagnostics for those that have lapsed because of the time taken between when they were originally done and now the patient needs to be seen again. So that's adding pressure on the demand. So despite being well at between sort of 110 and 120% recovered on the imaging modalities, we're still really struggling to get some of the weights down because of that increase in demand. And that is a separate piece of work that we're now doing across the system in terms of that demand and capacity modelling for diagnostics. And we've got to be very much aware that just having the theoretical model of what we'd need, we've got to be able to ensure that we've got both the infrastructure, both the physical diagnostic capacity, but also the workforce to deliver it. And we're having, I think it's fair to say, some success with our international recruitment. I know we managed to recruit 8 international radiographers, but already 2 have dropped out, and that's gone down to 6. So again, it is in quite a challenging environment, but I would expect that to improve. And again, we are working on the plans to do just that.
Great.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification, Julie. Zena, did you wish for a final word? Or
Yeah, I just want an additional point to advise the governing body on, and this is since the report was written, and it's around the infection prevention and control position at Robert Jones Agnes Hunt. It's a really important point. So RJAH, they've had a second MRSA outbreak, which we've reported through obviously to our quality committees and through to board previously. There was a quality assurance visit undertaken in February, which NHS EI from the regional team were involved in, and NHS have been providing dedicated support to the trust and to the chief nurse since the first outbreak, and certainly since the second one. A quality assurance visit was undertaken, which was arranged by the CCG. E&I joined that, and it was found that there was a lack of assurance on progress with the action plan and some matters of concern around fundamental practices associated with infection prevention and control. Since that time, the regional team have met with the trust. They remain not assured on the progress and the grip on quality governance. There has been an infection control governance review undertaken by an independent person for the trust, and that governance review now needs to be implemented, and the trust have commissioned some additional leadership to help support the chief nurse with that. I think NHS will be meeting with the system, quality leadership and others to be assured on the plan moving forward to support the trust, and the CCG have got a stronger part to play in those forward arrangements, and we've already put in some additional measures, both at an operational level but also at a more strategic level within the trust. So the trust remains red on the NHSEI internal infection control matrix. It's an internal document they use for risk assessing trusts, and they were on red since the first outbreak, and they remain on red at the moment, and we're working with them to try and reduce that risk down.
Thank you, Zena. Thank you for that update. Martin, do you wish to come back to Zena on that particular point?
I would if I could unmute. It's obviously a problem today. Thank you very much, Zena. That causes me just a little concern. If I recollect, and I haven't got the figures on the particular screen, but when I look through, if we look at our very long waiters, and there's something like 140 or more, I think something like 86 were for Robert Jones, and a large number were for spinal work. Is that going to adversely impact on that? Because clearly the last thing you want is a staph infection in a spinal operation. So given that we've got greater issues around orthopaedic surgery there, have we got a plan for resolving those additional long waiters for spinal surgery? Are we going to have to move them to be delivered elsewhere? I'm not certain how the Staph aureus changes the spectre of what we're going to do around it.
I'll ask Julie to come in, and I know she's put her hand up, but just by way of some immediate assurance, Martin, that the spinal surgery ward has been refurbished, so the environment is so much better now, and the trust were able to do that ironically because they had a closed ward because of COVID related sickness.
Zena, I'm really sorry to interrupt you. We're in danger of talking at cross purposes, so it's disorders that's been refurbed. I think Martin's question is about surgery, so they're not the same. So you'll understand the spinal disorders unit is the 46, sorry, specialist knowledge, 46 bedded unit, which is relatively self-contained. Martin's question was about surgery, which is different. So sorry to cut across you, just thought it might help.
Yeah, I was just, well, I'll let Julie answer the bit about the contingency planning, etc.
Okay, so as far as I'm aware, nothing's been raised to us as a risk for those long waits related to the infection control issues, Martin. But what we have been doing is working with NHS E&I. We had some capacity offered to us at the Royal National Orthopaedic at Stanmore, and we have had a handful of patients, about 7 patients, I believe, have taken up those offers and gone there. The other thing that we're doing is across the wider Midlands, the West Midlands and East Midlands, we're also working with NHSEI to have a combined spinal surgery waiting list, because it's not just Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, as you will know, and we're trying to make sure that patients, again, on a broader footprint, get treated based on clinical priority. So those are the things that we're trying to do there. There's also, for some of the lower complexity spinal surgery, I know Robert Jones are in discussion with one of the independent sector providers in Chester about being able to provide some additional capacity as well. So we're looking at all options to make sure those patients get treated as soon as possible.
Great.
If I may, thank you very much for the answers, both, and for Mark's comment. I think it's a shame we didn't mention some of that detail in the paper, because again, there's a theme, there's a tremendous amount of work that you've done here. I just read it and I didn't capture any of that. I think you're underselling yourself with all the hard work that you are doing. So thank you for what you are doing.
No, it's a fair point, Martin. The Robert Jones position has really kind of come up in the last week, 10 days. So to be honest, after Zena's worked with Julie, others worked really hard on it, but it's almost been after the production of the papers. So we'd expect to provide more information next time, but it's a fair point. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all. I'll probably draw this discussion to a close at this point. Just for a point of clarity for the minutes, the staph infection in spinal patients is with a PH, not double F. Okay, so the governing body is asked to note the content of the report, which we have done, and the actions being taken to address the issues identified. And we've also agreed that to try and have a greater granularity of the details of the actions taken for problems identified. Okay, thank you very much. So if we can now move on to the ambulance handover performance report, which Julie, I believe you're leading on this. Again, I'd like us to take it that the paper has been read by all present. And if we can start with questions and comments for Julie before, Julie, if we miss anything that you'd wish to highlight at the end, then do so.
And John, if I can just say, Sam will come to my aid on this in terms of us being urgent care lead, depending on the question. So we'll do a bit of a double act if that's okay.
We'll allow a double act. Okay, great. So questions from members, please. Okay, thank you, Mary.
Hi. From reading the paper, it sounded very SAT-based. And I do understand that this is a long-standing problem, which obviously has worsened. What I would like to know, which I couldn't get from reading the paper, is what bits or what parts is the West Midlands Ambulance Service? What are they going to do to help solve this? Because I believe it's not just a SAT problem, and I can't see what they are going to do.
Okay, I'll start with that, and then I'm sure Sam will probably come in with additional. I think, in fairness, I think it's the system has had a history of kind of a challenged relationship, I think, with West Midlands Ambulance Service, but I do think it's actually got better over the past 12 months. I think, if anything, we've been aware of our challenges, and actually, although obviously this focuses on Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, these challenges have been faced to a greater or lesser extent all around the country over recent months. So they are working with us on that. And I think their major contribution is actually, if you remember, probably 12 months ago, we had a very good performance in terms of the see and treat and the see and convey statistics, but we were very low on the hear and treat. And I think that is something that the ambulance service have done. And you will see from, I think it's the charts. I know it's difficult on the PDF, but on the separate version at the top of page 70, you will see there that actually there's been quite a significant increase in that hear and treat. So I think they have helped and supported that. I think the other thing that they have done has been supporting with what we call HALOs, Hospital Ambulance Liaison Officers. We've had those at both sites. Literally as much as we can, as we're able, as the staff are available, and also the ambulance service have also helped, as well as the HALO function, with cohorting at peak times again to help. So I do think they have done some work, but again, we are working well with them. There is a group now where actually it's one of their executives is chairing that group. So I think we have seen quite a difference in the dynamic and the relationship there. So I'm certainly more encouraged that there's more joint working, but happy to let Sam go into more detail.
I mean, to be honest, Julie, I don't think there's a huge amount more detail to add. I mean, as you've described, the relationship now is much better formed. I think that we're working more collaboratively together. West Midlands Ambulance Service are very engaged in developments that we want to take forward. So it's a much more collaborative approach. We've got lots of things that we are exploring. In particular, the single point of access has been very much a joint piece of work. They've been hugely engaged in developing that, and will continue to do so in terms of some of the ways that we want to enhance and improve that service. So I think it's fair to say that there is a significant amount of work now going on directly with the ambulance service, and they are very much engaged in that collaborative piece of work to make these improvements.
Thanks, Mary. Has that answered your question regarding the input from West Midlands Ambulance Service as well? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Rachel.
Hello, it was pretty much along the lines of what Mary's just said. It's good to hear that there is some collaborative working going on. I think in your paper it says in the last 3 months, STW had achieved 19 days where patient handovers for the ambulances had not exceeded 30 minutes. But on those days, that didn't reflect in the WMS constitutional response standards. So I think it's important that although there is a flow issue, and we quite clearly know that, and it's been heavily impacted by COVID, and we're seeing that much more in the community now, having effects ripple out than we ever did before. But you've highlighted that there is still some work or some information to get as to why when the handovers weren't delayed, that they couldn't achieve their constitutional responses. And I'm still interested in how and what they believe their significant incidences to be. When does their failure to achieve their target constitutional response then turn into a significant incident, and what the reporting is of that, and who does it go to?
And Julie, could I just sort of enlarge on Rachel's question a little, because it's a similar theme. We mentioned within the paper that once waits are minimised outside A&E, the projection is that it would release an additional 30 to 40 operational hours in the community, which it just appears that would equate to somewhere between 1 1/4, 1 2/3 crews working over 24 hours, which still doesn't seem to be enough to provide the resource for the category 1 responses, for instance. And is there a conclusion here that there isn't enough resource of ambulance availability, even when we potentially solve the issues of the waits outside our hospitals?
Okay, I think there's two things. I think in terms of the point that's made is you're absolutely right. This is not the only issue here preventing the achievement of targets, but clearly having that resource back out on the street, being available to respond to 999 is absolutely where we want them to be. So it's the best use of resource. If we go back over a number of years, remember that this is why ambulance services are commissioned at a regional level, because it's for very rural areas, they don't achieve the category 1 target. That's why it's achieved at a regional level, and you'll have some areas that will achieve it and some that won't because of the rurality, and that is that's an operational fact. We've grappled with this for years, and I live in one of the postcodes that has one of the worst response times, so I'm very aware of what that means, in reality. But we have to be aware that in terms of the resources that we have, both workforce and financial, that it would be almost impossible. We did work probably getting on for 7 or 8 years ago, where we quantified what we would need to do in order to achieve the category 1 performance for the rural elements of Shropshire, and it runs into tens of millions of pounds and literally tens of paramedics. So I think we have to be, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I think there's a reality around this that we have to be aware of. And as I said, that is why those measures are only done on a regional basis and not on an individual system basis. We do record that, we are aware of that, and that is we have strived for a long time to improve the outcomes and the response times locally within the contract, and to do everything we can to get the best possible performance in Shropshire. And because obviously the response times are better in Telford and Wrekin, as you would expect, again because of the very kind of tight location of that population compared to Shropshire. So it is a very challenging issue. But as I said, that's why it's commissioned on a regional basis, because of it broadens out, if you like, that rural and urban. Doesn't make it right for the rural populations, but that is how it's commissioned and how it's regulated.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Sam, did you want to come in on that point before I bring Mike in?
Yes, I mean, I think, you know, it's a very complex and broad picture, isn't it? So, so you know, we've touched on it certainly in the paper, some of the things that can help, and you've picked up on that particular issue, John, that can release more crews back onto the roads. But I think, you know, it's also looking at it from the other perspective as well, isn't it, in terms of, you know, what's driving the demand and activity, and what other options might there be to reduce that. So I think looking at our 2-hour community response, for instance, looking at other alternatives around category 3 and 4, in particular, we're exploring some elements around falls. There are lots of opportunities, I think, for further developing responses that can provide quick interventions for patients who wouldn't necessarily need an ambulance. So I think we need to look at this as a sort of multifactorial approach.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Can I bring in Mike, followed by Donna, please? Mike.
Right, just two things. One is on the background. We're saying funding one double crewed ambulance costs approximately £700,000 per annum. Is this figure actually correct? Because it seems a hell of a lot of money for one ambulance. And secondly, if it costs this much, what has happened to first responders? Because beforehand they seemed to exist, and now they don't seem to exist at all. And that surely that has been one of the issues about getting people seen in the community. I'm not going to talk about my anecdotes. I'm sure a lot of us here could give anecdotes, but that's not what the subject here is today. But I do wonder what is going on there. What has happened to them?
Can I ask Julie to respond to you at that point, please?
Community first responders do still exist, to the best of my knowledge. Mike, I think it's a reasonable point, and Sam and I will need to pick up with the regional commissioners what our latest position is on that, because again, that's something that we've continued to try and champion over the years across the patch, and we've done a lot of work, and particularly with we've had quite a few businesses in the area sponsor even community first responders to increase the numbers. So I know that's going on, but we'll get an up-to-date position, Mike, and not wait for the next meeting. We'll circulate that to governing body members in advance of that.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you. Honor.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thank you, Sam, for outlining all of the things that are happening, and Julie. It was just really on the back of some of these very long waiters, and obviously this paper makes reference to 2 handovers that were in excess of 10 hours, which I'm sure will be being considered as potentially critical incidents and the learning from that. But are they specifically looking at those individuals to determine whether there was an alternative pathway that they could have been? Because, you know, in my simple brain, if somebody was best cared for or managed for over 10 hours on an ambulance, was there an alternative for them?
So shall I jump in on that one? So I mean, I think we probably need to push West Midlands Ambulance Service for more detailed information in terms of some of the specific post incident learning, but certainly now that we have the single point of access in place, when our ambulance delays get to a certain point, or in fact even earlier than that, we are really encouraging both the staff and the West Midlands ambulance staff to review everybody who is in those ambulance queues to see if there is an alternative. We have managed therefore to pull a few individuals out of that queue and find alternatives for them, but that's not always the case. But yes, that work does go on.
Okay, thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. And if I can then bring in Adam before Mark comes in for the final word.
I was just doing the mental maths on an ambulance, and to have one person on the ground 24 hours a day, you need to employ 7 people, or 7 normal full-time equivalent employees. So that's 14 ambulance crew, plus a vehicle, which is quite expensive, plus all the fuel, plus the base, plus the mechanicals and maintenance. Doesn't seem an unreasonable price to me.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Mark.
Thanks, Adam. I'd be fascinated to see Adam's pad as he's worked that out. It's a great economic. So, and I agree with him. These are not vans. These are mini ITUs, aren't they? Blimey, look at the back of them. So I can totally understand that. Just a couple of things I'd like to mention. Donna said quite rightly, in an ambulance, in terms of the patients waiting, not necessarily, and probably not would be my answer. The actual delay is the release of the crew. So often normally these patients are actually in the department, but not released because there's nobody else to look after them. So I wouldn't want governing body members to be under the misapprehension that people are sat in the back of an ambulance outside the hospital. So, and forgive us, we've all been working so hard on this that the language becomes normalised, really. But that actually is the issue, which is why Julie talked about the halo work. So one of the things the West Midlands Ambulance are very good at is using a small number of staff to look after a larger number of patients. That's what the halos do often, so that the ambulance can be released back on the road. The other point, or a couple of other points just for consideration, I suppose. This report is about handovers rather than kind of absolute ambulance performance. And I think, John, it's something that we might come back to, or the ICB might come back to, in terms of the overarching ambulance performance issues. And I think I would prefer we did that with the ambulance trust with us, because I would agree very much. We've worked really hard on the relationship, and actually I think we understand much more about what they do and how they operate, and I think they understand much more about us and are a full player. And the example I would give in that, and unfortunately, and I'm going to ask for this to be recirculated to governing body members, because we've got an issue with the papers today, the PDF with the single point of access detailing, which is the appendix, is actually the thing that gives me optimism, that a significant number of patients who would have needed an ambulance before or conveyance to hospital actually was supported with a different pathway. And when we talk with the ambulance service, it's something they're really keen on, with the emphasis on single, because we've done some of this before, but actually had ridiculously multiple single points of access. And one of the things that Sam and colleagues have worked really hard on is having one single point of access. Sorry, I start to sound like Sir Humphrey and Yes Minister, but you get my point. And it's really important. And there's lots of optimism in that work, that we only convey the people to hospital that we need to convey. The second bit, of course, is the causal link between the number of patients delayed in our hospitals that need either to be at home or in a care home or elsewhere. And I'd remind governing body members that for most of this period, the vast majority of our care homes were closed to admissions, and there was little domiciliary care availability. So in other words, and forgive me to use a pipe analogy because it's people, I understand that, but it helps. One end of the pipe was blocked, meaning that you can't keep pushing stuff through it. And the way that plays out actually is at the front door, in terms of patients not being offloaded because the A&E department is full. There are patients waiting for beds. For example, the medical wards are full, medicine's outlying into surgery and so on, because people can't be discharged at the other end. So now, much of that isn't the ambulance service's responsibility, absolutely not. It is a wider system piece, the local authorities, community services, and the hospitals. And so there's much to do on this from a kind of system point of view. The final thing to say is that there are two things going on with the local authority. So the Health and Wellbeing Board wants to do some more work on ambulance handovers. And John, my suggestion is that we offer this paper, or perhaps a revised version of it with up-to-date data, because it's constantly changing. Things have improved in the last couple of weeks, but also with some of these comments from the governing body. So if we produce a kind of version 2 of this and share that with the Health and Wellbeing Board as the basis for a conversation, I think that would be useful. The second thing that the council is pursuing, and I offer this kind of politically as opposed to the Health and Wellbeing Board, which I think is a different approach. The council are pursuing a desire around, if you like, an independent ambulance service for Shropshire. Julie set out the case for why that will never work and isn't sensible. And I think we shouldn't play with that, because I think it's politics. But I think we should play with the Health and Wellbeing Board on seeing what we can do with our partners to improve the present situation. Sorry, it's quite a lot there, John, but
Yeah.
hopefully that was helpful.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you, Mark. And just before I draw to a close and capture some of these comments, Lynn.
I just wanted to share with the governing body that of the comments we receive about ambulance services, the majority of them are actually about the experience of waiting for the ambulance to arrive in the first place rather than waiting at the front door. So, for example, just yesterday we heard about a man who'd waited 6 hours with a suspected stroke before the ambulance arrived. So I just wanted to make you aware of that.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. And that's most definitely the aim, is to improve both parts of this, the handover part, but also the response times. Thank you. Okay, so the governing body is asked to note the current position. The actions agreed to reduce unscheduled care activity, preventing crowding in ED and improve discharges. In turn, it's aimed that these actions will reduce ambulance waits as a result of the improved patient flow. The progress against these actions will be monitored by the Urgent and Emergency Care Board on behalf of the system. And we've also articulated that we would wish the system and to see a continuation of ambulance service and all parts of the system, including community response, working together with this shared problem, together also with input from the lead commissioner, and that this be taken forward within the ICS, and also that we would offer a revised form of this paper incorporating our comments today to be shared with the health and wellbeing boards. Okay, thank you. Right, so if we're now probably over half an hour behind schedule, but I think those discussions were obviously crucial to our system. Can I move on to finance now? And Claire, hi Claire, again, the month 10 financial position, the paper will have been read, and if I can start by opening it up to governing body members for comments and questions for Claire, please. Thank you for the preparation of the report, Claire. And Adam.
Just one. It's quite a long way down. I think it was point 48, but I haven't quite rediscovered it in the paper yet. Where, unless I've misread it, what you said, what it says is that we've got a deficit which essentially consists of our share of the system deficit for West Midlands Ambulance Service and the overspend on the CCG, and apart from that, we're somewhere close to financial balance, and that seems a remarkable improvement on points in the past, and I just wondered whether it was really true, and if so, whether it was likely to persist.
Wow, so there's a bit to unravel in that then, Adam. So the system collectively does have a deficit against plan. The CCG and SAF are posting deficits at the moment. Robert Jones and Shropcom small surpluses. So when you aggregate them up, it's still a net deficit. For the CCG element of it, for the underlying position, the two key drivers of a shift or a worsening of our underlying position are, as you pointed out, the West Mids contract spend and some of the running cost issues that we're working through. Overall, in year, when we look at our performance against plan, we have been able to reduce the forecast deficit. So it's gone from around 10 million for the CCG to around 5 million. That's not through actions that we've taken or things that we've done differently. That's purely because of the volume of income that we've had for this year that we just haven't been able to spend or being able to carry forward into next year. And particularly those things have been linked to delays in getting projects off the ground like CDC, and also some of the workforce issues that we've touched on periodically through the agenda, because if we can't recruit to posts, we don't need to pay for those people. So I'm going to be the pessimist. That's what I'm paid to do. I think we're still in an extremely precarious position, and there's certainly a lot of work to do for 22-23 in terms of
getting into a better place. But for this year and this year only, we've been given quite a substantial amount of money that we've not been able to spend our way through all of it. And as a result, it has reduced the planned deficit that we've got.
Thank you, Claire. Okay, so in the absence of any other comments, Claire, was there anything else you would wish to highlight in particular from this report?
Only the action that's required, John. So it's that time of year when we're coming to year end and we need a statement from all governing body members, yes, which is mapped out in paragraph 37. So it's there for people to have read. This is no different a statement to previous years. We're not asking for anything unreasonable, but it's there rather than individually asking people. It's much easier to take a minute from the meeting. What I will say is, because we're having to do this a bit earlier, if for any reason you believe circumstances to change in terms of concerns around going concern or information in or out of the accounts, then please flag to either me or Jeff as chair of the Finance Committee and Audit Committee, because we can pull that through as we produce the accounts.
Thank you, Claire. That's excellent. So Governing Body Committee is asked to note month 10 financial position against plan, to note the work in progress to develop the 22-23 financial plan, and also to approve the annual accounts declaration set out in paragraph 37. Thank you very much, Claire. So I'm very aware that we're running behind, so I propose Hayley. I'd like to welcome Hayley Flavel, who's joined us. Hayley, hi, thank you. My suggestion is going to be, I don't know if Louise, whether you're expecting Louise Barnett to join us as well or not, but I wouldn't have thought so. No, okay. Well, Hayley, my suggestion would be that we move at this point to your item 33 on the agenda. I don't know if you're going to lead this or Zena to start with. I recognise you have a presentation, but if we can move to item 33, Hayley, and then that will release you afterwards to what I'm sure is a packed day anyway. Okay.
Thank you very much. So now you've just got me, so I hope that's okay. There was 3 things I was going to talk to you about after having a conversation with Zena. Number 1 would be our most recent CQC inspection, and that will be in a paper that I have sent to you. So I'm very happy to go through where we are now. Then I was going to talk to you about what came out of that inspection in terms of our must and should do actions, and what our governance is wrapped around those must and should do's. And then I was going to have a conversation regarding the most recent update regarding our conditions against our registration. So I hope that covers it all with everybody, and I haven't missed anything that I've been asked to do. So as you know, SAF has had many inspections over many years from the CQC and have been in special measures since about 2018. So we had several inspections, so 2018, 2019, 2020 and 2021. The most recent inspection was in July 2021. It was an inspection that looked into end of life on both sites. It also looked at urgent and emergency care on both sites. It did maternity on the PRH site, and it did medical care on both sites. So it was quite a detailed inspection. Prior to that inspection in July, we also had a focused inspection into children and young people with mental health in February the 24th of February 2021. So in the paper, as you can see, the consolidated ratings on both sites following our July inspection. And it is consolidated ratings because, as I said, 7 core areas were reviewed over both sites. However, to get our overall rating, it does also take into account those previous core services that have been rated over the years. And that's really important to remember, because the CYP may have been a focused inspection in February. However, it was rated, the core service was rated as a result of that very focused inspection in February. So as you can see on page 1 of the report, we do remain overall inadequate as an organisation when you have the consolidated ratings from both sites, but we did see improvements in many of the areas, even though our overall rating is still inadequate. We saw specific improvements on the PRH site in terms of medicine and also ED. As a result of our inspection, we had a number of must and should do actions. What we didn't have was any enforcement notices on the back of this inspection, which was incredibly pleasing because I believe previously many of our inspections have resulted in improvement notices as a result of the inspection, either 29A warning notices or section 31s. So from this most recent inspection, we have got a total of 71 must-do actions and a total of 70 should-do actions. They are broken down across all of the CQC domains. In totality, from trust-wide, we've got five must-do actions, which are in the domains of safety and effective. Maternity, we have 3 must-do in safe and should-do in safe and effective. End of life, we have 12, no we don't, we have 18 must-do and we have 6 should-do. UEC, we have 16 must-do and we have 7 should-do. Medical care, we have 20 must-do and 21 should-do. So it is broken down. What we have done is we have looked at our previous action plan and we've ensured that our previous action plan correlates to our current must and should do action plan, so we are not duplicating and it's really relevant and meaningful and appropriate to what we're trying to do as an organisation.
Hayley, can I just interrupt you briefly and apologies because I realised at the beginning I didn't introduce you as the director at SAF and I should have, that was an omission, apologies. I've been asked by Zena, is it possible to have the presentation displayed on the screen at all? Are you able to share or?
I'm on an iPad at the moment, so if you want me to log off, I can log off and log onto my PC, Zena. But I think I sent them all over, didn't I?
Yeah, so I'm not sure all of the papers that Hayley has sent have made it to our pack. That said, we did receive some information to the last board. I think the important one for us, which I can display, is around the conditions. So with your permission, I'll put that up next because I think that's helpful for us to see the kind of the legislation around what you have to deliver to now. Are you in agreement, Chair?
Yes, because I think the pack that we've received, unfortunately, just has focuses on the section 31 conditions. But yes,
I did send over a report that went to the committees in Commons, Zena, in terms of, and I'm very happy to resend.
Yes,
it,
and we didn't share that because it was an internal document to SAF, and this is a public meeting, and we didn't feel it was right and proper. So, you know, if I know you've spoken to it, Hayley, I think what we can do for members is to provide some additional information after the meeting by way of updating the presentation with certain elements. I think. Mark, you and I all went through it last time in terms of the change in rating. So we have actually already received this information. Question is, do we need to receive it again?
No, once is sufficient, absolutely. So now I just share your screen, Zena, and let Hayley take it from there. It sounds sensible to me.
So in terms of the action plan, there is some governance wrapped around the action plan. We have review meetings with core services because obviously end of life is a core service, as well as the divisions. They started in September and we go through the monitoring of that action plan. This is probably an example of that action plan. I'm sure you won't want to see all of that. We also have other parts of myself twice. We also use other existing forums within the organisation. So, for instance, the Safeguards and Operational Groups, the Ends of Life Group, and MTAC, which would be the Maternity Transformation Assurance Committee, to again track some of those actions. All of our governance feeds into QOC, which is our Quality Operational Committee, which then also feeds into QSAC, which is our Quality, Safety and Assurance Committee, that is a subcommittee of board. So that's just a little breakdown really in terms of our most recent CQC inspection, the must and should do's that came out of it, and the governance framework that's wrapped around that for delivery. In the paper, which I'm very happy again for Zine to share with members, is our progress regarding our CQC improvement plan, and also Zina and I have got an agreement that it will come quarterly to the system group for oversight through those means as well. These are just a few slides just to demonstrate where we are with our section 31s. So as you know, the organisation had a number of section 31s against its registration. We had sections against 2 regulatory activities. So that would be assessment of medical treatment for detained under the Mental Health Act. That's one regulatory activity. And the other regulatory activity is treatment of disease, disorder and injury. So this just really demonstrates where we were. So we had a children and young persons focus visit in February 2021, whereby 6 conditions were placed. Oh, sorry, Zena, can you just go back a sec? Where 6 conditions were placed on the trust. So 6 conditions on the RSH site and the PRH site, giving 12 conditions under that regulatory activity in totality. Our other conditions were the same 6 conditions were also placed on both sites under a different regulatory activity, so giving another 12 conditions. We had 8 trust-wide conditions placed on the organisation on both sites, and we had 10 conditions placed on ED on both sites under that same regulatory activity. So in totality, we had 60 conditions placed on our licence. The next slide, thank you, Zena. So the CQC, before our inspection, there was a conversation that I had with the CQC, and we were going to have a look at some housekeeping with our conditions, because our conditions have been in existence since 2018. They were a result of different visits, and at times some of those conditions were duplicated or they were very similar, and some were applied to one site, some were applied to both sites. So there was going to be an opportunity prior to our inspection for us to work with the CQC to do some housekeeping and absolutely ensure that the conditions were meaningful and appropriate. Then our inspection happened, and following our inspection, the CQC very kindly offered to do that work for us, and this is as a result of that. So in terms of the assessment or medical treatment under that regulatory activity of detention under the Mental Health Act, out of those 6 conditions, 1 condition remains, and that's condition number 2, which relates to not admitting under 18s of who present with isolated acute mental health needs. And in all honesty, as an organisation, I think this is the right thing to do. And Zena and I have also had a conversation, because this also is I know it's a condition on SAS as an organisation, but it also is a leverage for the system to work differently to support those children and young people, which we have been doing since February 2021. So that condition remains. And the next slide, please, Zena. I'm not going to I'll do this one. So this is the same 6 conditions about children and young people, but it's under a different regulatory activity. This is under the treatment, disease, disorder and injury regulatory activity. And again, the only condition that remains is not to admit under 18s. The other conditions have all been removed, which is really positive. So out of those 12 conditions, we've got 2 that remain. This is really positive. So then I'm not planning to go through all of the rest of the slides, but I am just going to give you some high level information. So out of the other part of our regulatory activity and conditions, we had 48 conditions, but it's quite difficult to measure apples with pears. So we had 48 conditions, and what has happened with those conditions, 3 conditions have been varied. So that is condition 8, it's condition 13, yeah, and condition 19. Okay. So the remaining conditions have been reviewed and they've been removed. Those conditions that remain have been varied. So the conditions that we've got are those 2 conditions regarding not admitting mental health under 18 for isolated mental health under 2 regulatory activities and apply to both sites. The other 3 conditions sit under the treatment of illness, disease and injury. They are conditions regarding care planning and risk assessment. That's number 8. Number 13 is regarding paediatrics in the ED department, and number 18 is regarding triage. They are 1 condition, they apply to both sites, and they're under 1 regulatory activity. I'm sorry, I've gone through that really quickly, but it's quite difficult to do apples with pears because the conditions were, there was many of them. Some were very similar. So in summary, we had a lot of conditions. The CQC have reviewed of our conditions. We've got significantly less. Those conditions that we have got are appropriate to the challenges that we have got now. And they, as I said, they relate to care planning and risk assessment, children and young people and not admitting, and our UEC challenges that you're all really well cited on.
Great, thank you.
But I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for spelling that out. So often the richness is in the discussion. Comments for Hayley on the floor, please. Thank you, Zena.
Well, just to briefly say thank you, Hayley. It is very complex and complicated. We do receive a detailed discussion of this at SOAG, and I think SOAG has given a confidence that the Trust is making progress. And we know that the ratings overall for the Trust haven't changed, and in part that's due to the limited number of inspections they've had on their core services, so that will take some time to convert their scorecard, but what we see in the CQC report is an improved narrative, and that's really important, as well as some outstanding practice in maternity around the staff approaches and attitudes, and that's to be commended given the difficult circumstances our system is operating under, but also the reduction in number of conditions, and this is a really key piece of information we've been awaiting. Affirm the fact that progress is being made, and if I can give reassurance to the board that this is information that's kept under detailed review by the CCG quality team, notwithstanding the complexity of the information that's been shared today.
Yeah, thank you, Zena. And can I bring in Audrey?
Thank you very much for a comprehensive paper. And yes, you know, commend the work that has been done so far and the improvement. For me, the Trust got a CQC rating of inadequate for safety. Do you think there needs to be a specific narrative, perhaps for the public, around this and how you are moving the Trust out of inadequate and getting to the next level and above and beyond, obviously?
I think it's a really good point. I think the devil is in the detail, as someone mentioned before, because safety has got very key things for all of the domains. I agree with Zena. We've had a number of inspections over a number of years, and that does impact on what that narrative looks like. So yes, there can be a specific narrative, but overall we've seen improvements in safety in many of the areas. Where we didn't see any improvements in this inspection was end of life care, and as Zena is well cited, there's a huge piece of work internally regarding end of life care, but also from a system perspective as well. I would expect us to have a CYP inspection, I would imagine, if I was a betting woman, sometime this year, because again, that's where our inadequate in safety sat, and that was following that focused inspection in February that looked at specifically mental health for children and young people within the acute setting, and looked at 5 sets of notes. So again, it is about, absolutely, there's a narrative and there's that assurance piece for the public and the local communities, but there's also a lot more narrative and context to just the overall rating. Also, sorry, just going back to Zina's point as well, maternity was pleasing in terms of the outstanding practice that was identified in the report. We didn't change our ratings. We still requires improvement. The areas which were requires improvement was well led, and when we were visited in July, that's absolutely a fair reflection, because as those who are close to what I do, Mark and Zina, from a SOAG perspective, we've had significant challenges with leadership within the maternity services over the last 12 months, with interim people in post. And also the other element was safety. And again, we've done an awful lot of work within the trust, but B, within maternity regarding governance. So maintaining our rating was very positive for the maternity services, because, as you know, up and down the country there's significant challenges in maternity, and following a number of CQ inspections up and down the country, people's ratings have dropped. The only outstanding practice we got was about maternity, which was really positive, and you're all, I'm sure, really well sized on the recent CQC maternity survey, which was February 2021, which was published February this year, which put us in the top 7 from an inpatient maternity survey perspective, which again was a very positive message, as that wasn't an inspection, that was purely based on user feedback and experiences. So thank you.
Thank you. If I can bring in Mike and then Lynn, and then Hayley respond to their questions or comments jointly, that would be helpful. Thank you. So Mike.
Yeah, Anna, thank you for that. With it just dazzled me head. My concern has been about how does the children's bit of bid admissions, does it feed into a review of children's mental health services as well? Because obviously if they've been admitted to hospital, they can't go anywhere else. So is there, how does it feed into children's mental health services?
Okay, so Mike, I think the question is, I mean, the paper's very much the SAF orientation of the CQC report, but Hayley, did you want to comment on that?
I mean, yes, and I also will bring Zina in as well, because I work quite closely with Zina. So our condition is we can't admit any under 18s with isolated mental health, but those patients aren't the only. What we do admit patients with mental health if they've got physical health needs. So an example of that would be an eating disorder child or young person who has physically deteriorated, who needs to be admitted for physical needs. So for instance, may need refeeding regime, etc. So if we have cases like that, which we do, we have a number of complex cases within our children's ward. We work alongside our MPFT colleagues into ensuring that we are providing appropriate support for that children, young person. Zina has been very supportive in that, because we have enhanced that offer over the last 12-15 months. But there's still a long way to go, isn't there, Zina? Because that is one example of a child and young person with a mental health condition, but we have got other much more complex health other needs as well, Michael.
Can I just crystallise Mike's question? Sorry, I've kind of lost Mike. Do you want to just...
Oh, it was just how does it, the fact that, you know, that you've had people have been, how does CQC, does it feed into the children's services? Because obviously if people have got mental illness and they're being placed there, that usually means they got nowhere else to go. So therefore there must be an issue elsewhere. And so surely if you're doing the CQC inspection of some things like that, then there must be an input into the children's services.
So if I could just comment then, Mike, and hopefully this will be sufficient, but happy to pick it up separately in the interests of time. CQC inspect individual organisations. They don't necessarily inspect pathways of care. Now they're changing their methodology to do that and to look at the system approach to all of these things. That said, what the work we've done with SAF is to understand why children become placed in ED and in the ward and delayed there or stranded in acute services when we think they should be better placed elsewhere or dealt with differently along earlier stages of their pathway. And that can include tier 4, but it can include local services as well. I can't speak to all of the detail of that, and Claire Parker is our director responsible, but I'm sure she'd be happy to bring a summary or to pick this up separately. I think it probably is something the governing body ought to be cited on a little bit more, but I know that that is work that is underway.
I know it's going off slightly left wing, so I'm quite happy with that discussion, and you can close that there. But it is something that I think we do need to just keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And final question from Lynn, please. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to make the governing body aware that the recent piece of work completed by Healthwatch Shropshire and Healthwatch Telford and Wrekin around children and young people's crisis mental health services was instigated by Hayley and SAF as an opportunity to hear from young people themselves. It's unfortunate that we didn't hear from more young people, but I think what our report does show is the complexity of the issues and the challenge for the system in meeting the needs of these young people. So if you haven't already, I would suggest that you have a look at our report. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much for highlighting that, Lynn. Okay, well, thank you, Hayley. Thank you for your time and coming to present to us and for fielding those questions. That's much appreciated. Okay.
No worries. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Right. Okay. So moving back in the agenda to item 30, planning and restoration system operational plan. Sam, thank you. You provided us with the paper in advance. If I can, as per usual, move to questions and comments from the floor, please, from members. Okay, I mean, I noticed that the workforce is referenced within this as well, Sam. It's a theme that we've seen. Is there anything particularly that you'd like to tease out for us?
No, I don't think so. Fairly straightforward paper. I think it's fairly self-explanatory and hopefully gives the assurance that's needed that the planning process is underway and is tracking through as we would expect at this point. Yeah, no, and I'd agree. It's a very clear and well-written paper, and yeah, hence I suspect the absence of direct questions for you, Sam. So thank you. So. So the governing body is asked to support the proposed operational planning approach for 22-23. And in the absence of any opinions to the contrary, we do. Thank you, Sam. Okay, if I can now move to the elective recovery report. Julie, again, thank you for providing the report. And once again, if we can move directly to questions and comments from the floor, please. This is item 31 on the agenda. Okay, Julie, I mean, I've just got one question if I set the ball rolling, really. It was just that, you know, I noticed on page 9, I think page 9, we received the ERF funding for 21-22. And I mean, I'm delighted. That's good. It's good news for our system. I thought at one stage this had looked nigh on impossible, but can you just elucidate on that?
Yes, basically, NHSEI underwrote the extra costs that we incurred in terms of trying to maintain our elective recovery during the financial year, so that financial risk disappeared. As you said, because of the pressures, we weren't able to do all the extra activity that we'd hoped for. So actually our overspend, even though it was underwritten by the regulator, was less than we thought. Unfortunately, that's not always a good thing. I think that was because of basically we had lots of staffing issues because of COVID over the winter, so we weren't able to make as much use of the kind of insourcing services that we would have hoped for. But we definitely I think it's probably fair to say, since writing the paper, we had our there's a new monthly elective and cancer recovery meeting with NHS England, and we had our first one on Friday. So just to update the governing body, that actually it was our update from the regulators was really very positive. They felt that we'd had significant pressures over the winter period, obviously not only because of Omicron, but other issues, and particularly escalation into day surgery units across both Shrewsbury and Telford sites. And in those circumstances, we had managed to maintain the focus on the clinically urgent and the cancer cases, and that we felt they'd, in all that we'd managed it as well as we possibly could do, and particularly the improvement on the 104 weeks was noted, and really, in both parts of the system, both Robert Jones in terms of their sterling efforts on spinal, and SAF in terms of just minimising theirs to 74 with all the the cancellations and the pressures they were under, was noted as a really good effort on behalf of the system.
Yeah, great, many thanks, Julie. Okay, so governing bodies asked to note the content of the report and receive partial assurance regarding Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin System's ongoing delivery of the elective recovery plan in 21-22. And to add to that, I noticed that on page 9, it's also proposed that an update be provided at the next governing body on elective recovery plans, including ARF for 22-23. Okay, thank you very much, Julie.
Thanks, John.
And if we can move on to the board assurance framework paper, please, Alison. Again, we've read the paper. Thank you for providing the updated BAF. If we can move directly to questions from members of the floor, please. Sina.
Thank you. Alison, I don't think my updates have been captured in the paper, in particular on the BAF, the risk around looked after children I'm recommending is downgraded and monitored on the risk register rather than as a BAF risk. I just wonder if my updates can be incorporated and the BAF recirculated with those updates included. I did provide them by the timeline, and you and I have discussed them, so I know you've had sight, but I think there's been some kind of admin glitch on the way.
No, don't panic, Zena. So what everybody has in front of them is the version of the BAF that went to the audit committee in January. We've just completed another review, which you are referring to, which is going to the audit committee next week, Zena. So that, just to clarify for everybody, this is a moment in time, and as Zena's well illustrated, we are constantly updating this on a bi-monthly basis. So there is a new iteration already in the pipeline that will be coming to the June meeting. Okay, does that help, Zena? Sorry to confuse you.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, it was very noticeable that the BAF, Alison, had had a considerable amount of work on it since we last saw it at governing body. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and there's more still to come.
Yeah, okay. No, that's really positive. Okay, so in the absence of any other comments or questions regarding the board assurance framework, the governing body is recommended to review the BAF, consider if any additional assurances are necessary that the risks of the strategic objectives are being properly managed, and also to accept assurance from the CCG audit committee that the principal risks of the CCG not achieving its strategic and operational priorities and have been accurately identified and actions taken to manage them. So thank you, Alison, for that. Okay, so then if we can then please move to the integrated care system progress report. Simon's unfortunately been unable to join us today due to national commitments, national meeting commitments. This was going to be a verbal update, and I'm informed that Alison and Claire are going to update in Simon's absence. Claire.
Yeah, I'll say a few things, and then Alison, I'm sure, will correct me or remind me if I miss anything out. And I will keep it brief because I'm conscious of time. So the few things that Simon was keen to just update the governing body on and make sure that you're cited on it. First of all was the recruitment, which Mark has already covered, so I won't dwell on that one. I think it's important to give some assurances to governing body about the work that's continuing to develop the integrated care board and the system, all the governance and process that sits around it, so that when we bring the new directors and board into place, we've got all that infrastructure there for them. So we've talked a lot at CCG governing body about the due diligence exercise that's happening around the CCG handing over. There's also a due diligence exercise being prepared from the ICB point of view to take on all of the new things. So all of that is lining up quite nicely. We've also got a key milestone coming up at the end of March for submissions of our latest readiness to operate statement and our system development plan. So there'll be more information on that, I'm sure, post 31st of March. But Alison, I know, is absolutely up to her eyeballs in things like constitution, terms of reference, and all the really good stuff that goes into that to give some assurance that we're ready, that the new organisation will be ready to take on those responsibilities. Couple of last things then. One is to note the intent that the ICB will be operating in shadow form from the 1st of April. So Simon and Neil are very keen to make sure that we start to develop that identity and really start to operate in a way that people will recognise moving forward. And also just wanted to touch on just a couple of specific things that are in progress in the pipeline that some of you will be aware of or even involved in, but just as a marker really to give a sense of the breadth of what's going on. So I know there's a lot of work going on at the moment on the comms and engagement strategy for the system, and at the moment the rollout for that is still planned for May. So as I say, some of you will be either aware of or heavily involved in that. There was a workshop held a couple of weeks ago now with the current attendees of the ICS Shadow Board, where Simon took the opportunity really to reconfirm the priorities that we have as a system, very much make the point that we're not starting with a blank sheet of paper here. There's some really good stuff that we've got, but we tend to confuse ourselves with the level of detail we go into in terms of priorities, planning guidance, pledges, must-dos and all those things. So he's trying to find a way of really cutting through that and distilling the good things that we're doing into something that's meaningful for all members of the system. And then just one other thing to note is a session that the chief execs had with Mike Farrer, who's been very well known on the national NHS circuit, and we are investing some time and energy with the chief execs to developing their relationship, building on looking at our development as a group within the system for how we really drive the agenda forward. So hopefully that gives board members a good flavour that there's all sorts going on, but I'll do my best to answer any questions if there are any.
Great, thanks very much for stepping in and providing that, Claire. Lynn.
It's not a question. I just wanted to take this opportunity really to mention that for me, the comms and engagement piece is really important, because I think that there is bound to be some anxiety from the public that they really feel they don't know what the ICS is going to be, what it will mean for them. And so I know that those discussions are taking place, but as yet, I don't believe any really useful information has been able to come out. And so I would encourage the system to do that as soon as possible, really.
Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn, for that. Okay, thanks very much, Claire. Okay, thanks for that update. So the following papers are for information from the various committees. There's no any other business that's been notified to me, although I should, if I could just take the liberty of using this moment to mention that I've failed to acknowledge during the questions from the public section that we have received further questions prior to this meeting, which will be available, answers to which will be available on the website within 3 working weeks of this meeting. Okay, thank you. So date and time of the next meeting, as Mark has mentioned earlier, Wednesday the 8th of June, to be held in person with a planned start time of 2 p.m. at the Albrighton, and that will be great to meet in person once more again. It's been too long, it feels, that we've had to communicate across screens. So thank you all for your input and today, and it just leaves me to resolve that the representatives of the press and other members of the public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting, having regard to the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, publicity on which would be prejudicial to the public interest, section 1 paragraph 2 of the Public Bodies Admission to Meetings Act 1960. Thank you very much. I'd suggest then that we have a 5-minute recess, because we'll all get deep vein thrombosis.